Everybody ready?
And all the times that you have tried to play the game, trying to keep the red flag flying here.
Hello, we're back here. Yes, sorry for the little delay. Obviously, we've had some issues we've had to deal with recently. But welcome to Socialist Think Tank. We're back again, and I'm here with Jane. Obviously, Paul and Laura are away dealing with things at the moment, so we thought we'd try and keep the fires burning and have a show. Jane, do you want to introduce what's happening tonight, please?
Yes, thank you, Mark. Yeah, tonight we're going to be speaking to Dr. Deepa Driver and our commentator Miriam Wood about the situation with Julian Assange, the conditions he's been kept in, what's going on with him and the implications of that for our human rights and for democracy in the Western world. So very happy to have our guests on tonight. So I'll just go to Miriam first. Just say hello to Miriam, and did you just want to introduce yourself? Oh, you're on mute, Miriam.
Hello, I'm Miriam Wood. I'm a Labour Party member and activist of many years in Dover, in the southeast area. I'm like Jane. We're both in the same Labour Party, and we've been battling all sorts of things, the same things that go on everywhere else in the country, but perhaps, particularly down here with the consequences of Brexit and things like that. I'm not sure exactly what you want me to say, Jane. Do you want me to say anything else, or is that enough?
No, that's lovely. Let's just introduce you to everyone. Okay. And thank you, Miriam. And then we've got Dr. Deepa Driver here. Dr. Driver, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
We're very happy to have you.
I'm a trade unionist and academic. I work as a negotiator I work as a lecturer in my day job, but in my work outside of the day job, I'm a negotiator for UCU, the University and College Union, which represents staff across several universities, further education colleges, prison education, and adult and continuing education in the UK. And in terms of Julian's case, I have been serving as the legal observer in Julian's case for a few years now on behalf of the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers. Of course, and I speak in a personal capacity because statements for Haldane will be issued by themselves. But I'm very glad to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to, first of all, I've got some notes here. I wanted to, if you wouldn't mind, just look at where has Julian been for the last 10 years? Because I'm not sure a lot of people know all the facts about this. It's a name that we all know, but do we know, is he in London? Is he in America? Is he walking around? Would you mind giving us some information on that?
Sure. For those of you who've never heard of Julian Assange is the founder of Wikileaks, which is a news organization. And the way it provides news and journalism and information is through the use of leaked information that is provided by insiders in various places, whether they are in corporations or information about state crimes, information about the environment, for example. So amongst the leaks that have been published by WikiLeaks, we have the Trafigura dumps, which relate to toxic waste dumping off the Ivory Coast. We have information about corruption in Kenya within Daniel Arap Moi's government. We have information that was released in relation to the Iraq war and the Afghan war, the illegal war in Iraq, as many will remember that Blair took us into. Information about the torture victims at Guantanamo, and a huge amount of information besides, including about secret deals between various countries in Europe and the United States to secretly sue governments behind the scenes, for corporations to sue governments behind the scenes. So the gamut of information is phenomenal, and it also includes information that many of you will be interested in. And maybe you've got a little screen guard on your little camera on your computer. You do that because we knew from WikiLeaks releases that certain intelligence agencies were spying on us through our devices. Maybe you're careful about how you use your TV, or you don't buy an Alexa because, you know, data is going back to whichever big company. This is all because of the kind of information that WikiLeaks released, that we understand what's really going on in the world. So WikiLeaks, in a nutshell, was a way of the people surveilling the state instead of the state constantly surveilling us. And it is for this reason that for the last decade or so, or just over a decade, Julian Assange has been severely persecuted. He spent close to 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy in asylum. And about 3 years ago, he was extracted from the embassy with the connivance of the British government. Alan Duncan and others have admitted to their role in this. And he's now in Belmarsh maximum security prison, locked down often 23 hours a day. And this is a peaceful, non-violent journalist who's done the world a great service. So I hope that gives you a bit of context about WikiLeaks and Assange and where he is now.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Now, this leads on to something else. Now, I heard you speaking a few days ago, and this was very informative for me, actually, and I'm really keen to look at this. So what about the Swedish charges? Because I've been on a show before, and I've been asked about what's about the Swedish charges against Julian, and I remember saying, well, there are no charges now, they've been dropped. So I just wondered if you might be able to say a little bit about the so-called Swedish charges.
Okay, perhaps it's worth taking a step back and understanding what this discussion about allegations of sexual violence in Sweden were about. About 10 years ago, or slightly more, about 11 and a half actually, Julian Assange revealed some very highly prized information about what was really going on in relation to American foreign policy and the foreign policy of its allies in terms of the crimes and illegal crimes they were committing abroad, war crimes, etc., etc. As a result of this, America and its NATO allies and supporters went into overdrive to try and shut down WikiLeaks. And part of that strategy was, you know, cutting off their finances, for example, shutting down access to MasterCard and Visa and PayPal, etc. But part was also discussed through what information that we can now see through WikiLeaks releases, which shows how intelligence firms who were supporting, like Stratfor, who were supporting the United States government, were talking about bringing down Julian's family, Julian's friends, dragging him from country to country, making sure he didn't get due process, treating him, as they said, like a bride in prison, and making him eat cat food. And one of the things they did was to, with the help of Sweden, which many of you will always think of Sweden as a very highly respectable state, a state where human rights are prized, where we respect the rule of law. But unfortunately, Sweden over the last however many years, at least the last decade and more, has been a close ally to the Americans and to NATO. And Julian Assange was accused of sexual assault in Sweden. Now, one of the important things for everyone to remember is there were never any charges. So the case was always kept through the 7 years in preliminary investigation stage. It was never taken beyond preliminary investigation stage to the stage of charges, because once you get to the stage of charges, you have to provide the exculpatory evidence, etc., etc. But these allegations that were made in Sweden were investigated by the Swedish public prosecutor and closed. The case was then reopened by a prosecutor in a nearby town on the instigation, and I won't go into the detail of this because what's really important to know is that the case was opened and closed 3 times, the third time of which was the most recent and where it has been closed for good, so to speak. And at every stage during the investigation process, because neither you, Jane, nor I will ever know what happened in that room between the women and Julian and what accusations were made. And I want to make very clear that these were not accusations of rape in the way we conceive rape in Britain. So the Swedish term for it is something called minor rape, and it has a very specific connotation. So if people wish to understand the details of that, I would urge you to look at the investigation done by Professor Niels Melzer, who's the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture. He's a fluent Swedish speaker who was originally put off by Julian's lawyer's request for help because he had heard the same rumors that most people have heard, that, oh, he's a rapist, he's a hacker, he's a narcissist. And he thought, why should I care about this person? And the more he immediately closed down. And then if he was approached again a few months later, just as Julian was about to be pushed out of the embassy. And at that stage, as he began to look at the evidence, being a fluent Swedish speaker, looking at the way in which, for example, one of the women had refused to sign her.
Oh dear. Oh, I'm so sorry, Dr. Deepa. We lost you for a second, just at the point when you said one of the women had signed the woman's statement.
Sure, one of the women refused to sign her statement because of the way in which she was being railroaded. So it is very important that those who are interested in the detail of that read Professor Melzer's book, which is out now in English, and he's a wonderful writer. And he's also a very meticulous man, which means that he provides detail at every stage of the investigation, including the way in which Keir Starmer's CPS have been involved in stitching up Julian Assange, for example, where Stefania Marizzi, one of the Italian journalists who has been a wonderful warrior on this case, has been investigating. She found evidence from Keir Starmer's CPS of letters which say to the Swedish prosecutors who wish to close the case, don't you dare get cold feet. This is not being treated like any other investigation. And forget about what it says in those letters. You and I can see that any investigation kept in preliminary investigation stage for 7 years without justice for either the accusers or the accused has nothing to do with justice. It has to do with political persecution. It is also very obvious that this is a case of political persecution. I don't know, perhaps, Jane, somebody needs to be muted, but I can hear quite a lot of typing in the background. Maybe that's...
It'll be me or Mark. I'll get us with me.
Super, thank you. I don't know why, maybe my device is sensitive. It's thank you. But one of the things that you can see from the way in which the Ecuadorian embassy, a sovereign embassy, was surveilled by the Americans. And we now have information which is available readily to anybody who's on the internet. You can see on YouTube evidence of Julian's privileged conversations with his lawyers being spied upon. So you can see that, the British state is obviously complicit because they were standing outside and guarding the embassy while the Americans were pointing laser microphones, and the British state has been very reluctant to reveal information related to exchanges with the Americans. So you can see they're not unaware of what was going on. And then in all of this, what you can see is the basic rights due in any judicial process, which is for the person who is accused to have a trial so as to clear his or her name, for the person who is the accuser to be able to provide their evidence in a secure and fair way, and for a trial to be held in a way in which both sides have what is called equality of arms. That is, those who are prosecuting do not have disproportionately larger resources and disproportionately larger access than those who are defending themselves, or vice versa. But in Julian's case, all of these basic rights, for example, what the Americans called attorney-client privilege, i.e. his private conversations with Gareth Pierce, who defended the Birmingham Six and others, were recorded. His medically confidential information was recorded. And this was not just recorded, it was given to the very state that is trying to prosecute him. And this information, once it is in the hands of that state, has been misused in really bizarre ways. For example, they paid a serial paedophile and fraudster, Sigurdur Ingi Thordarson in Iceland, to provide evidence against Assange. And this information is now in the public domain, thanks to some fantastic work by Icelandic journalists who have revealed long, 8-hour-long interviews that they've done with Thordarson, who has recanted his testimony and said that the FBI gave him a quid pro quo. They said, you can have immunity on your prosecution if you incriminate Assange and make up stuff about him. And in all of this, what is also most bizarre is that the prosecuting state attempted, or planned rather, to murder Julian in the embassy or kidnap him. So you have very basic rights like, privacy infringed. And you would say, oh, well, he's a hacker, he's this horrible guy, and he might be a terrorist. Let's infringe his privacy. Okay, you infringe his privacy. Once you've infringed his privacy, is it also okay to infringe his privileged legal conversations? Is it also okay to plot to murder him? And is it also okay to do this when actually he is a journalist with, he's a member of the MEA in Australia. He is an award-winning journalist. The information that he has revealed to this day remains 100% accurate. So if a journalist is to be treated in this manner, then what protections do the rest of us have? And what does that mean for human rights and democracy? But we'll come to that, no doubt, at another stage. But you wanted to talk about the Swedish allegations, and I would urge everybody to read Professor Meltzer's book. It's available in the bookshops now. And if you go on Verso's website, you can get it at 20% off at the moment. So I can pass on a link to yourselves. I don't get any commission off of it, so I'm not promoting it for any reason.
That's lovely. Thank you. We can put that out on the social media. That would be brilliant. And thank you for explaining that, because the Swedish so-called charges, or the lack of charges, when I heard you speaking about the statements, the witness statements, and the fact that there's evidence they were changed by the police, to the point where one of the women wouldn't sign the statement because she said it did not say what she had said, that's pretty damning. I might just bring Miriam in here. So, Miriam, as someone who might not have known so much about the background on this, would it come as a surprise to you that Julian's been treated in this way? When any other person in custody, someone who we had strong evidence was a serial killer, wouldn't be spied on. What do you think about the fact that this is happening to Julian Assange?
Well, I have followed it loosely, through the various things. I was actually quite concerned when I first. I was concerned when I first read about him, about those accusations or this investigation, because it seemed to me that some people who were supporting him were kind of dismissing the idea that sexual offences were serious, that this was important. I have realised, as you say, that the law is different. The kind of accusation is not, it's not quite what we think of as being rape. I think it still does involve non-consensual activity, or activity that the other person doesn't clearly consent to. But obviously, if there's never been any accusations, and it clearly was being used as a pretext for detaining him, and I've always felt all along very disturbed by that, really, because we seem to be in a situation where. Well, I guess it's always been the case. If you're seen as an enemy of the state, anything goes. But an enemy of the state is not necessarily an enemy of the people. And this seems to me where we are, you know, actually revealing some of the things that WikiLeaks revealed, was very much against the American and the British state. It wasn't against us. It wasn't against the British soldiers, for example, who were sent out to fight a war that really wasn't, you know, a legal one or a worthwhile one, even, or one that could achieve what it seemed to be setting out to achieve. So, yeah, I mean, I think they did a fantastic job, actually. That's my bias. And I know that sometimes people do fantastic jobs who aren't necessarily in every aspect of their behaviour perfect. So I don't know anything more about it than that.
I just come in there to say it is really important. I think you're right, Miriam, that irrespective of who makes the accusation, I think that's one of the reasons why the left support for Julian fell away, because most people on the left have very strong commitment to equality. They have a very strong commitment to ensuring that justice is done. And accusations of whether they are of sexual assault or whether they are of pedophilia or whether they, you know, these kinds of things are accusations that really eat away at people, because people get disgusted by it and they think, I don't want to listen to it anymore. I don't want to know more about it. I'm not going to, I have so many causes. There's so much that's wrong with the world that I'm not going to get involved. But it is really important that people realize that the accusations against Julian, and this is something that Lisa Longstaff at Women Against Rape has said many times, the accusations against Julian are about using these women in Sweden to cover up rape, murder, torture, and killing in Afghanistan and Iraq. It is not about justice for the women. It was never about justice for the women in Sweden. Otherwise, Sadiq Khan and the Metropolitan Police wouldn't be spending tens of millions of pounds surveilling an embassy and surveilling the activists outside. It's always been about stitching up Julian, which is why the charges were never raised, and which is why, you know, even when Julian offered several times to be interviewed in the Ecuadorian embassy, to go to Sweden, as long as there was a commitment not to extradite him onwards to the United States, the Swedish, on British advice, didn't do it. It is also important to remember that Julian was very brave in saying he would go back to Sweden to be interviewed, because just before that, there was the case of two Egyptians, Elzari and Agiza, who were indicted with the help of Americans to Egypt and tortured, and whose cases went to the European Court of Human Rights from Sweden. So Sweden is no longer the kind of trustworthy, respectable human rights respecting democracy that we think of. And people in Sweden are the ones who are making this point, because they realize that, you know, using Sweden as a veneer has been very helpful to America. Sweden wanted to sell more Gripen fighter jets to Afghanistan, and they wanted to prolong the war in Afghanistan so that these fighter jets could be sold. So there are various other factors at play. And, you know, we can talk about Sweden till the cows come home, but firstly, we cannot equate accusation with guilt. And that is something that we as the left have to realize, and we as socialists have to realize, you know. And secondly, when the state goes after someone, it isn't because that person is an enemy of the people. It is because there is somebody who is corrupt or, you know, extremely dangerous to those who are in positions of power. And there is somebody who is revealing their corruption, somebody who is revealing things that are embarrassing to them. And you can see this in the case of Khalid El-Masri. He's a German citizen of Lebanese origin. He was on holiday on the Macedonian border. So a European citizen on holiday on the Macedonian border, when he was abducted and indicted by 8 CIA agents. He was then taken to a CIA black site and tortured in a case of mistaken identity. They continued to torture him for 3 months, even though they knew he was not who they thought he was, because they said, oh, well, he must be bad anyway. They then, after several months, let him loose on the Albanian border, from where he was picked up by Albanian police and sent back to Germany, where nobody would believe his story. And it is only through the work of journalists and WikiLeaks releases that Mr. El-Masri got justice at the European Court of Human Rights. We also know through WikiLeaks releases that the United States put pressure on the German government not to acknowledge Mr. El-Masri's story, not to go after the 8 CIA agents who indicted him. He was really badly tortured. He was sodomized, he was beaten up, he was treated extremely horrendously. And his family, actually not knowing where he was, moved back to Lebanon. I mean, can you imagine how much this man's life has been destroyed? And it is only through WikiLeaks releases that Mr. El-Masri got justice at the European Court of Human Rights. And it is to cover up the treatment of people like him, or the treatment of the 14-year-old boy who was beaten up, sexually assaulted, etc., at Guantanamo, that, you know, the Americans and their allies have been smearing others. And it is important to remember that without WikiLeaks, we would not know about it. That doesn't mean to say that you have to like Julian Assange or you have to believe everything he does is good, but you have to recognize that the United States indictment against Julian Assange criminalizes journalism, it criminalizes the receipt of information. And it puts us in a situation where journalists who are not American citizens, who are carrying out journalism outside the US, can be reindicted to the US and put in a supermax prison. These prisons are the darkest corners of the world. You know, they are places where people are allowed to talk to their family for 15 minutes twice a month on an FBI monitored phone call. They are in their cell alone in an 8x12 concrete cell, 23 hours of the day. You're fed through a hatch. And this is being done to a journalist to silence criticism of American war crimes, of the deaths of children. And you don't have to like Assange, but you have to recognize that the American indictment has nothing to do with Sweden. The American indictment has to do with hiding war crimes.
Thank you. I mean, what Julian Assange has done, he has revealed that powerful Western governments, that the US government has perpetrated, and you know, their people in representing them, and they've covered up rape, torture, murder, senseless murder of civilians on a huge scale. It's absolutely disgusting, and that's basically what Julian has done. He has revealed these facts to the public, and we've got a question in the chat there. Mick's asking what charge under UK law is that he actually up on, so would you be able to help us on that?
At present, there is no UK charge, so to speak. The way the extradition works is that the United States make a request. They do not have to prove that Julian committed any of the crimes that he has committed. There is a presumption in favor of extradition. So unlike in most legal cases, most people will be familiar with the idea of beyond reasonable doubt or on the balance of probabilities. But in an extradition case, especially where the country has a treaty with the other country, so Britain has a treaty with the other country in the case of the US, and just as an aside to let you know, this treaty explicitly excludes political crimes. Anyway, Julian is being called up on charges of espionage for revealing factually accurate information. So there are 17 counts of espionage and 1 count of conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. And the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion charge relates to a conversation that was had over the internet with Chelsea Manning, because you will, those of you who are familiar with the case will know that Chelsea Manning provided the Iraq war logs and the Guantanamo Bay detainee assessment briefs and the Afghan war logs, etc., to Julian, to WikiLeaks. And when she did so, she did so because she already had access to the information. She didn't need to hack into anything. She already had access. So what is this conspiracy to commit computer intrusion charge? It was Chelsea wanting to cover her tracks and also to download some music off the internet. And Julian's accused of conspiring to crack a password hash, which would allow her to do that. But they never managed to crack the hash. So the use of this conspiracy to commit computer intrusion charge is hyped up by people because they assume he was trying to hack into Department of Defense servers or State Department servers. But actually, what this is about Chelsea and he having a conversation. And I would urge you to look at that conversation because that is available online. And it says, oh, have you tried this? And she says, oh, no, well, that might not work. Well, I'll think about it. And that kind of conversation is what is going on. And you just think, this has nothing to do. There are so many people who try and hack into US government servers. The US government is not going after them. The US government is going after Julian because it wants to prevent Wikileaks from revealing even more information about US crimes. And you can see US crimes taking place every day because the US government goes into various countries in order to open doors for its corporations and to allow wealth and resources to be extracted from poor countries all over the world and repatriated to rich shareholders in Britain and America and in the first world. So if we are socialists, we need to understand this is the directionality, and this is why governments like the US government go after people like Julian Assange.
It's terrifying. So my understanding is that for these charges of espionage and attempting to hack that they want to charge him with, if he is convicted in America, he could face a 175-year prison sentence, which is just terrifying. I just want to just bring Mark in for a second there, just going back to what we were saying about the events that Julian has revealed, which have led to this persecution by the US state of Julian. I mean, how does it make you feel, Mark, to think that you could be, like El Masri, an innocent man on holiday, case of mistaken identity? The CIA thinks they can swoop in, pick you up, take you off somewhere, torture you, work out they got the wrong person, torture you some more for 3 months, destroy your life and your family.
It's incredibly
okay.
It's not. It's incredibly scary. I mean, but what we have to realise is the UK, and this, I believe, it was actually under Blair, has signed an extradition agreement with America. That America can say, "I want Jane Strange," and we have to just give you to them. I mean, although under different circumstances, it reminds me of the story. I don't know if you remember of Gary McKinnon, the Scottish hacker who hacked into NASA, and because he was looking for extraterrestrials. It was really big in the about the turn of about 2000, and it was only by various means that he got released, because literally under this agreement, America can say it wants a citizen of this country, and England just have to actually extradite them. Just to let everybody know, you might notice we've been mentioning some questions. If you look to the left of us, there's a screen, and you'll see all the comments that are coming off on Facebook, YouTube, and I think Twitch. If we've got anybody on Twitch, it'd be great to hear from you. And you can give us your comments. I'm going to hopefully look in on Twitter as well. So if you see me looking down, that's why and typing, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to get a load of different things all together. So the hashtag is, of course, hashtag Socialist Think Tank. So put any comments on there, and we will try to actually get them into the show. I'll go back after doing my housekeeping and do some more.
Thank you, Mark. Mark is our tech man tonight. So just going back, I wanted to just clarify, what is the current situation with the court proceedings with the extradition? And I wondered if Dr. Driver could help us with that one again.
Sure. So I neglected to complete my sentence earlier about how the Extradition Act works, which is that given the way and Mark was absolutely right about this relationship between the US and the UK, where under Blair an agreement was signed, and that it is that very treaty that excludes the political prisoners from being extradited. But it does have a presumption for equivalent states for extradition, which means that you have to demonstrate that you meet one of certain bars that prevent extradition. And at the lower court stage, which is at the magistrates' court, which is where all the extraditions are judged in England and Wales, a decision was made to prevent extradition on account of, as you can imagine, Julian has really suffered while he was in the embassy. For example, he had a very nasty tooth infection which needed a root canal, but the United Kingdom government wouldn't allow him to leave the embassy to have medical treatment. So for several years, he's been stuck with terrible tooth pain, and anybody who has tooth pain for more than a couple of days knows how that feels, especially if you need a root canal. He's also had a serious shoulder injury. He's had chronic osteoporosis from deprivation of sunlight, so he cracked a rib while trying to tie a shoelace. His health is very fragile. Most recently, he suffered a mini stroke while in Belmarsh. So people who are aware of this will know of the transient ischemic attack, the TIAs, or the mini stroke, which are a precursor to the full stroke. And so Julian is in very, very frail health. And the magistrates' court decided that on account of his health and the possibility that he might commit suicide, he suffers from depression, and as anyone would do if 5 states had ganged up to stamp on your head. But he has a young youth history of depression as well, and which is he has moderate to severe depression now while in the prison. And the extremely poor prison conditions in the United States, the horrific prison conditions in the United States, which constitute, in the UN rapporteur's opinion, the kind of torturous conditions that he would move from here to. The lower court decided he should not be extradited. The United States then appealed that verdict, and it was decided at the High Court that the United States could give in something called assurances, which are things which say, oh, we won't do this. For example, in Julian's case, they agreed in effect not to torture him if he was in the US, which is not a great agreement. You know, they're not doing any big favors by agreeing not to torture him, so to speak. They said they wouldn't put him under this thing called SAMS. But now Julian's lawyers had asked for permission to appeal the High Court decision and to go to the Supreme Court. So those assurances and various other things will be tested at the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court rules in Julian's favor, it'll uphold the lower court verdict not to extradite. If the Supreme Court rules against him, it'll go back to the lower court, at which stage Julian's lawyers, when it goes to Priti Patel, can launch something called a cross appeal. So they lost on several grounds at the lower court stage, but they won purely based on this, his mental health. And so the grounds related to journalism, etc., were never tested in court, so to speak, through discussion. There wasn't any discussion of many of the other issues. So that could potentially be tested. So it's a long process. And one of the things I want people to recognize is the problem, of course, is the extradition. Yeah, but that's not the main problem. The problem is he will die before he is extradited. He will die or he will crumble. And nobody knows what the long-term effects of psychological torture are on the body. And Julian has suffered both psychological and physical torture, because having these kinds of serious illnesses and being in a prison like Belmarsh, which is one of the most harsh prisons you can be in, because it's a terrorism prison. It's a prison where we put in, people who are serial rapists, murderers, people who are in for very grave crimes. And Julian is there, and he doesn't get good nourishment in his food. He doesn't get any intellectual satisfaction. He's lost 10 years of his life when he is at his most productive. He's away from his family. He's got 2 very young children and elderly parents and a fiancée. He doesn't have anybody around him. He's all alone. And anybody on this who's watching, who has friends or family who have mental health challenges, know what loneliness and isolation can do to you. If you take that loneliness and isolation and add to that years and years of smearing without you being able to defend yourself, years and years of being called, saying to you, oh, he beats up his cat, he smears fishies on the wall, he's a horrible person, he doesn't care about people in Afghanistan, he tried to kill people. These kinds of things, time after time after time, if they're said to you and you're gaslit, then it can have a really nasty effect on your mental health. And it's really important for us to recognize that, this is the time for us to step in, because, we saw what happened to Jamal Khashoggi. They sliced him up and put him, killed him. They're doing the same with Julian Assange, but it's death by 1,000 cuts. And it's painful and it's awful and it's wrong. And we have to stop it.
We do, thank you. So I'll just go to the comments and read out a few comments that we've had from the viewers here. So just going back, Neil Terry, a little while ago, says it's interesting how we can extradite a journalist for telling the truth, exposing war crimes, but a woman who killed a kid on his motorcycle outside an American spy base runs off to the US to avoid any accountability. And then Anthony, if the UK didn't have a charge, what gave the British establishment the right to take away someone's freedom and the right to free speech, which obviously we've gone over it. It doesn't sound right to me, but...
Actually, we haven't gone over that. The reason he was taken into Belmarsh was on the grounds of bail jumping. So anybody who deals with the hostile environment knows that seeking asylum is not a crime. Yet the British courts, and in particular, Judges Snow and Taylor and others, including Arbuthnot, have, there is a huge amount of judicial conflict of interest and misbehavior. For example, judges calling him a narcissist in court when he goes to be heard and just says his name. Judge Emma Arbuthnot, who many of you will know, her husband has dealings with the intelligence services. Her son runs a company called Dark Trace, which militates against organizations like WikiLeaks. She herself has received hospitality from the FCO, and you will see all this information. It's not something that I made up. It's Declassified UK. Matt Kennard and Mark Curtis have, through their journalism, exposed this. And this is a judge who has opined on Julian's case at an earlier stage. So these judicial conflicts of interest have created a situation where asylum was treated as bail jumping, and that bail jumping was used to put him in prison, at which stage the US indictment was unsealed. And then he was not, the cruelty through this process is he was not even allowed to prepare his defense. He was given a laptop with the keys glued down. When he was served the second superseding indictment on the first day of his September extradition hearing. So he didn't have enough time to speak to his lawyers. Throughout the COVID period, he was denied access to his lawyers in various ways. And so there are no charges in Britain. They're never, other than this spurious bail jumping charge, which was then used to facilitate. So the Swedish charges facilitated the bail jumping charge. The bail jumping charge then facilitated the American thing. And sorry, I used the word Swedish charges by mistake. I mean the Swedish allegations. There were never any charges, and I correct myself from saying that.
Thank you. I didn't realise that, and it all sounds very murky. So Miriam, I know that you've been quite actively involved in trying to campaign to improve the conditions for refugees down with Napier Barracks here. Obviously, that's a very different situation, but I mean, are you surprised at the way things have been handled with what you know about the way that the refugees at Napier have been treated, and I mean, does it exceed even the bad treatment that they get?
I haven't had very much involvement with Napier, but I have over the years been involved with Samfar, the charity that supports asylum seekers, or supported them in Dover when we had them a removal centre and supports ex-detainees. It doesn't surprise me. I mean, it must be a terrible insult to the wonderfully democratic British government to feel that anyone claims asylum from our government. I mean, it's foreign governments that do nasty things that people might need to claim asylum for, and even then, of course, we don't recognise their asylum claim. Priti Patel is absolutely determined to insist that the Syrians coming over in the little boats to the Channel are actually, they're economic migrants. What is it, Newspeak or whatever it is? The George Orwell term where you call a thing the opposite of its real name, and people fall for it. Doublespeak, yes, there you go. So no, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think it is the way in which this court has been used. The courts. I mean, I read a certain amount about I think it was at the magistrates level, where really there seemed to be very little. Everything's charged against him. I mean, we think justice, but it's blind justice. It's the scales, and you go to the Old Bailey and you see justice with holding up her scales, and you think, what a wonderful legal system we have. Except that actually, it's all weighted against it's weighted against all sorts of people, but in particular, someone who challenges the state, which is what he's done basically. So no, I'm not surprised. Sad to say.
I'll just go back to a few more comments now that we've had from the viewers. So Ellie, the establishment and masters of propaganda, especially in the cover-up of military atrocities and blunders, and she's mentioned here is similar to the carefully targeted smear campaign. With the talk about Swedish charges that never were to alienate the left from Assange, and looking at the similarities between that and the smear campaign against Corbyn and the cover-up of Bloody Sunday. And then Paul Smith has said, the times we're living in now are very similar to that portrayed in the dystopian TV drama Black Mirror, and I'd love to disagree with that. Then we've got a comment from Unity News here. Always get your information from several independent sources and make up your own mind, which I think is a very, very sound comment. So Socialist Think Tank is a member of the Independent Media Association, and there are lots of good independent small media outlets out there, but it can be difficult to get the truth if you are looking at the mainstream media. Sometimes there are a lot of other influences going in there that you may not be expecting. I just want to go back to the subject of the US assurances, because looking at some of the information that I've seen that Stella Morris, Julian's partners, put online, it seems to me that the assurances could be rescinded on the basis, of Julian, complaining about the fact that it wasn't very nice of the CIA to have plotted to murder him, which sounds to me like quite a fair comment to make. And if someone had tried to murder me and then I was in their captivity, I might say that too. So do you think, Dr. Driver, that we can be sure that Julian will be safe in the guard of the CIA, and that he will face a fair trial if we do hand him over?
So firstly, the fact that the CIA plotted to kill him, and then the conditions which he will be in the US pre-trial, not post-trial, pre-trial, are determined by the CIA and the FBI is something, shows you how little we can place reliance on this. But what's really important is Amnesty's Julia Hall has very clearly said that the assurances aren't worth the paper they're written on because of the very point that you made, which is that the US reserves the right to rescind these assurances based on any comment. And one of the things, sorry, I'm interrupting myself, but one of the things you have to realize is this is not just things which he says, but things that they are afraid he might do. So they can say at any stage, we are concerned he might do X, Y, Z, and therefore we can rescind these assurances, is my understanding. So the ways in which these assurances, firstly, the letter of these assurances in previous cases, for example, cases in Spain, there is clear evidence of the United States providing assurances and then abiding by the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law, by saying, okay, for example, you need the permission of Australia for us to return you back to Australia. But if Australia doesn't ask, they don't have to worry about it. Similarly, if in the US, if you do something that they think might reveal the Vault 7 data, they could put you under special administrative measures. So all these assurances are just complete bunkum. The United States lost their case, and they decided that on the basis of that, they would now put in assurances so as to overturn the judgment of a judge so the assurances have never been properly tested in court. And this is what has been upheld at this stage, which is what is going to the Supreme Court, that government should not be allowed to lose a case and then put in whatever diplomatic assurances they want beyond the stage where this court cannot scrutinize it. So that's where we are. So I don't have any trust in the assurances. You can see how people are treated in the United States today, not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, today. You can see how Chelsea Manning was tortured for revealing what she did. And she was kept, in a cell where the lights were on 24/7, where she was given a suicide vest to wear all the time. She was not allowed to change in private. She was allowed to exercise for 1 hour at 3 a.m. in the morning. This is the treatment she suffered. She was kept in a box at one stage. This is the treatment she suffered in the United States. What are they going to do to Julian, who received that information, published it, and is capable, because Chelsea is not capable of publishing more, right? Because she's no longer in a position where she has access to the information. Julian still remains a publisher to this day with a valid journalist pass. What are they going to do to him? Because they want to break him and they want to break Wikileaks so that nobody dares to do what he did. And everybody talks about this potential chilling effect on journalism if Julian is extradited. You tell me today, if any of the mainstream journalists or even the alternative journalists were to receive the Guantanamo Bay detainee assessment briefs, how many of them would dare to publish it? Knowing that the US has now criminalized journalism. No one. And that's why we need Julian Assange. We're going through a COVID crisis after a crisis of a pandemic of poverty unleashed by the Tory government. If you want to know the truth about corruption, if you want to know the truth about the environment, if you care about schools in your area, hospitals in your area, medical care, if you care about politics, if you care about refugees, if you care about even your own, if you don't care about society but care about yourself, you still need to have people like WikiLeaks who understand what's really going on in the system to tell you so you can take informed decisions. And if you care about any of those other activist causes, remember that without journalists who will publish the reality of what's going on, you will never get the traction you need to make change in the world. And we need people like Julian Assange for that change to happen.
Absolutely. It's terrifying. I mean, to say that it's criminalized is an understatement as well, really, because if I thought that, if terrible atrocities had been committed and that if I revealed it, I might face a 2-year prison sentence in a UK prison, that's not a prospect that I would like. But that's very different. They've taken his life. He's been, incarcerated basically for 10 years now, and the prospects only look like they can get worse. 175-year sentence in the most horrific conditions in America. Like you say, his physical and mental health has deteriorated severely because of the conditions he's already been kept under, and basically this is a slow death sentence that they've meted out to him without trial, without evidence. So it really is very frightening. I mean, it's not just Julian, is it? It's his legal team too. I've heard that his legal team's offices have been broken into, their papers have been gone through, and it seems very likely that was state sanctioned in order to look into, you know, the what should have been their confidential evidence, and this isn't something that would happen to someone accused of you know, other crimes. So I just can't understand the possible justification for doing this. Oh sorry, I just was going to, there's a few more comments here that I wanted to read out. I
think Jane has muted herself here. Just going to see if I can.
Sorry, I have muted myself. Sorry, everyone. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, Unity News has written, America will disappear him as soon as he leaves the UK. We must not let him go. Everyone should write to their MP regardless of whether they respond. They are legally forced to ask questions in government. But if you don't email your MP, they can ignore it. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of MPs who have no interest in helping Julian Assange. But if they get, you know, thousands of letters from their constituents, it will make them stop and think. The people, you know, who can keep them or take them out of office at the next election, if we're all asking them, if we're telling them we're aware that this is going on and this is what we want, then it's, you know, for this man's life, for the sake of all of our freedoms, it's worth writing a letter.
Yeah.
And then we've got Anthony Riley, what court did the bail reference? And if it was in the United States, they shouldn't have jurisdiction within the UK. What UK bail violation was broken? And to point to what crime committed within the UK. So this, did you say, Dr. Driver, this was to do with, at the time, the UK prosecution service was trying to get Sweden to put forward charges. And so it was on the basis that he'd broken bail on the charges that never actually did come to be.
Well, actually, it's a long story, but it's in relation to him taking asylum in the embassy while being under there was a European arrest warrant out for him, which he challenged, which went up to the Supreme Court. And Baroness Hale was amongst the people who ruled in favor of Julian, although the entire judgment went against him. But in all of this, when Julian realized that there was a serious attempt to extradite him to the US, he sought, because he knew he was going to be murdered, he sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. And they used that to suggest that was a bail violation because he was required to sign in every day. They then used that supposed bail violation to arrest him and put him in Belmarsh. I mean, how many people get put in Belmarsh for 6 months or thereabout? He actually got a 10-month sentence, but he was, you know, he finished his term after 6 months. So he served his time for skipping bail. And then after that, he's purely being held on the United States indictment. So it's purely an extradition request. It has nothing to do with Sweden. It is purely to do with taking him to the US in order to torture him and silence him.
Terrible. I've got a question in the chat here from Ellie for you. Does Julian have access to anything like a computer or books or pens and paper, something to escape, if briefly, from the mental starvation of isolation?
Well, for a long time, he didn't have, for the first 3 odd months, they managed to lose his glasses. So he didn't even have access, and you know, anybody who wears glasses who's not able to have access to their glasses knows how frustrating that is, especially if you're highly intelligent like Julian is and want to read, etc. He was given a laptop, but the keys were glued down, so he couldn't prepare for his case. Now he has access to his paperwork. If you write to him, if you include, I believe you're allowed to include certain things, and if you look on the rightjulian.com website, tells you what you can include and what you can't, etc., and what the address is. You can also use email a prisoner to write to Julian, but I would suggest writing in the post, because it's always nice to receive a letter, isn't it? Even if it's just you saying you really care about him and you think that there are people outside who care for his well-being. And maybe if you're taking an action in your local community, maybe you're handing out some leaflets. The Committee to Defend Julian Assange, which is also known as the JADC, you'll find them on Twitter on Committee to Defend Julian Assange, or they have a website called Wise Up Action. If you look at that website, they give you lots of information about all the events. There is a vigil every Saturday outside Belmarsh. There are also vigils in other parts of the city organized by other supporters. In London, there are vigils taking place in Germany, in Austria, in Switzerland, in France. They recently held a 1-month showing in Paris in a central cinema of something called Hacking Justice, which is the story of Julian Assange and his lawyer Balthazar Garçon, who is very well known for his role in prosecuting Pinochet. And so it's really, there's loads of actions taking place. The Committee to Defend Julian Assange, which is the grassroots support organization in the UK, will send you flyers and leaflets if you want them, if you'd like to just hand them out one day. If you have friends and neighbors, get them to talk about the case, talk to them about it. If you're embarrassed to talk about it and don't know much, there is a 1-page brief for anybody who wants to know it with links in it. I'll put the link in the chat and give it to Jane and Mark, and hopefully they can circulate it to everyone. But
Thank you.
That'll tell you everything you need to know about the case until most recently, of course, last week's Supreme Court decisions are not yet in there. But hopefully all this information is available to people. Whatever you can do, if you can do one action, if you can write to your MP, do that. If you can write to your MP and do a protest outside, do that. Do whatever you can to stand up for this, because it matters to you and your cause. And right now, if you like cryptocurrency, right now there's something that's open, which I don't know anything about, but it's called a DAO, which is lots of cryptocurrency users are collecting money for Julian's campaign, and it's been opened, I think, 36 hours, and it's raised about $11 million or thereabouts. And it's available online. You can see who donated. Most people are donating in very, very small amounts from all over the world, the Far East, everywhere. So many millions of people are really supportive of Julian. So please have a look, and I can put that in the chat as well for those who are slightly more technically savvy than I am. I just don't know how it works.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Go ahead, Mark, sorry.
That'll be something for James, one of our the big tech guys at Socialist Think Tank. He's really into his cryptocurrency, even making our own cryptocurrency. But all of this has just reminded me. I heard a story back in July about Priti Patel looking to make journalism on akin to actually spying. I'll put the link in the chat, but I just was Googling and I found this link on the Canary, which is another great news source. Don't bother with the mainstream legacy media, Novara, Us, and various others. And this brilliant tweet from John Simpson, who you might have seen on when he was in the Iraq War. He was a war correspondent. Priti Patel's Home Office wants to make it a crime for journalists to embarrass the government by publishing leaked official documents. The maximum penalty would be 14 years in prison. This would put British journalists on a par with foreign spies. That's on John Simpson News, and he sent that on July the 21st, 2021. I heard a quote once that capitalists will use democracy until they can't use it anymore, and that's what we're seeing. We are seeing things descend now, and we need to be aware, and that's what we're here in Socialist Think Tank for. And this all links in, that America doesn't like to be embarrassed. The UK government doesn't like to be embarrassed at all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Well, I'm just going to put that link in the chat. There you go. It's gone on YouTube. I'll put it on Facebook in a second as well. Brilliant. Let me just see if we've got anything else coming in here. Ellie says thank you, but beware of crypto. It's well above my understanding level as well, so I won't be dabbling, but it's just really lovely to know people are doing things. And actually, I think being on the left the last few years have been very hard and very disillusioning. So actually, it's very nice to hear that there are things we can do. There's some really little things we can all do that might make a difference to something this important with such huge implications. We can just write a letter to our MP. We can write a letter to Julian and just cheer up his day a little bit. That's great. It's really good to know, and that it makes me feel a little bit more positive now. Miriam, did you have a question you wanted to come in with?
Yes, I just want. I was just looking at something about critics of Assange, and I wondered whether Dr. Driver could answer these questions. I mean, they're kind of things that we might immediately dismiss, but it's always interesting to know what the answer is. Moreno, the Ecuadorian president, accused him of using his stay in the embassy to spy. That was one thing. And the other thing, Hillary Clinton, can I just read this quote? She said, "I think it's clear from the indictment that it's not about punishing journalism, it's about assisting the hacking of a military computer to steal information from the United States government." And someone else said about the terrible damage that Assange had done to America's relations with the rest of the world. I just would be interested to know how you'd answer those things.
Yeah, I mean, there are some fantastic smears. One is that, you know, the biggest one of them is that Julian put people's lives at risk by, you know, confidential informants, etc., their lives at risk as a result of the WikiLeaks releases. Anybody who has looked at, who attended the hearings, anybody who understands how WikiLeaks works knows that part of WikiLeaks' model is the number of experts they use in order to ensure information which is revealed is firstly accurate and B, doesn't, you know, cause harm. And there is a wonderful recording available on YouTube of Julian speaking to the United States government, telling them that somebody else had leaked some information. The Guardian journalists, David Lee and Luke Harding, in their book, had put a password out, which made certain information available. And you can see how the United States government refused to do anything about it, just didn't do anything about it. So the United States government and the information, firstly, the information that Julian revealed was at secret level, not at top secret level. So the kind of information that comes out there is of an entirely different nature. It's information that is embarrassing, information that reveals criminality, but isn't necessarily, you know, the top secret protect as you have on Ruth. I believe her name is Ruth Smith, isn't it? Who had this label put on her. So that's about putting lives at risk. The second one you said was the what about Lenin Moreno? Now, the Ecuadorian government, Alan Duncan in his memoirs has clearly said that the UK brokered a 4 billion pound IMF loan to Ecuador in exchange for them kicking Julian out of the embassy. So Lenin Moreno, as anybody knows, wasn't, you know, when he took over from Rafael Correa, everybody thought he would be okay, but actually he's been a real puppet of the United States. And you can see, because the Ecuador has received a further, I believe, £6 billion in loans from the IMF as part of all these kinds of machinations. So Moreno is not somebody you can rely upon. He talked about Julian mistreating his cat and smearing feces on the walls. He just made that up. It's lies. You can't do anything to correct it. But, you know, people can say anything. They could say, I beat up my children. I mean, you have to make judgments based on what you know. There was one other thing you said, Hillary Clinton. Could you repeat that? The smear that she said. Sorry, I think you're still muted though, Miriam.
She said it's not about punishing journalism. It's about, well, it doesn't make entirely sense, actually. It is about assisting. So it's about punishing someone who's assisted hacking a military computer to steal information from the United States government. That's so basically it's very simple, black and white. You steal information, you have to be punished by 175 years in prison, apparently. But yeah.
I mean, and one of the things that, you know, people often say to me, people, and even, you know, the lawyer in court was saying, well, if a journalist were to break into somebody's house to get information, that would still be a crime. But these are all false equivalences. national security journalists every day as their bread and butter help sources who already typically have access to the information to deliver that information safely to journalists. They also help these sources cover their tracks. That's all that Julian did. He did not commit any crimes. He did not himself hack into any computers. He didn't need to, because Chelsea Manning already had access. She provided the information, and she said that several times, voluntarily, because she could see that this was wrong. If you have evidence of hundreds of thousands of people being murdered, and you are part of the system that is murdering them, you have a responsibility and a duty to reveal that information. And that's what she did. She suffered for it. So Julian's never hacked into anything. I told you a little bit earlier about that private conversation that they had about how she was going to cover her tracks and how she could download some music. So the fact that Julian is being persecuted for that shows you what Hillary Clinton's after, because Hillary Clinton was really embarrassed by information which showed how Hillary and in the DNC leaks showed you what Hillary Clinton was up to in preventing a socialist and preventing not a socialist, but at least a leftist from coming into power, Bernie Sanders, who would have been the people's choice, and what kinds of things the Democratic National Convention got up to prevent democracy. And people like Hillary Clinton, people who like the Democrats often say, oh, well, he brought Trump into power. Well, would you like
we lost, is it just me that's lost Dr. Driver?
Of corruption.
Sorry, Dr. Driver, I lost you for a few moments. Did anyone else? Or was it just me?
I think.
I'm so sorry, we just lost the last little bit of what you were saying.
I was just saying that we can't, just because we dislike Trump, we can't reveal information about him and then hide information about people like Hillary Clinton. Even just because we might not want Trump to come into power. What we want good journalists to do is, when they have evidence of corruption, when they have evidence of state crimes, to reveal them. It is then up to the people to judge. And Hillary Clinton was up to a lot of nonsense, as you can see with the way in which the DNC and others stitched up Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton was, part and parcel of serious war crimes all over the world. So these are not people who are any better than Trump. They're just better at presenting it to the world. Trump is uncouth and crude, and Hillary is slightly more polished. But they're all much of a muchness. Just like Tony Blair is not much different from Boris Johnson, is not much different from Keir Starmer. They're all much of a muchness. We had one chance at socialism, which was to some extent Jeremy Corbyn. That didn't happen, unfortunately, and very sad for all the people dying on the streets, all the children going hungry, all the people who are disabled not getting their benefits, all the people who would have benefited from energy companies being in public ownership. We had a chance to do that, and it is because of lies and smears. And if people are going to be taken in by that, they need to realize that then their lives get very miserable, as our lives have got now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I'll just read out a few more comments from the viewers. Unity News has written, which I think we'll all agree with here, that Julian is a political prisoner. I think we absolutely agree with that. She says, thank you for speaking out about all of this, about the situation with Assange. Anthony says, we're in fascist times where the capitalist class will defend itself to the point of violence and lies. This is where independent media has to shine a light. And it's strange, isn't it? Because a sentence like that, I think maybe 20 years ago, I might have assumed it was a little bit over the top, and I'd love to still have that opinion now, but I really don't think it is at all. Deirdre's put a hand clap on, thank you. So I think there was a lot of support. I think Lizzie, Unity News have put on as well, spot on with what you're saying there. And I think this is something that I did want to go on to, the implications for our very democracy. It's frightening. We shouldn't be covering up things about anyone, and obviously the implications of what's happened to Julian Assange for free and independent media it's really frightening. Miriam, do you want to come in there?
On the injustice and inequality of our system, well, you know, what is there to say? I mean, you know, we live in extraordinary times. I'm not very young, and I probably have drifted through my life, always a political animal, but you know, kind of thinking, well, it'll all come out in the wash, and we'll get there eventually, and things will get better, and so on. And actually, I think in the last 12 years, probably more like the last 20 years, actually, things have got steadily worse. We've had little, you know, glimmers of hope and brightness, but actually, you look at the appalling kind of corruption of what purports to be a government for the people, you know, elected by the people and so on. And you look at, I'm sorry to say this, the pathetic opposition, which is, to my mind, and I'm now sticking my neck out as a Labour Party member, actually quite happier to persecute its own members, activists, who don't completely toe the party line, than presenting, you know, a serious opposition to the government. And I just, it seems to me that corruption has gone very, very deep, and I don't know where we go. I actually think Jane and I both belong to a political reading group, and I've just been thinking maybe we ought to go back to 1984 and read that again, because it seems so pertinent to the situation at the moment. I don't know what you think.
It does, doesn't it? It really does. I mean, do you think, what impact do you think it would have if we had, you know, an opposition that was speaking out, calling out all of the untruths, you know, fighting back and making public statements? Obviously, we had that, I feel, with Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party. And what do you think was the impact of that?
Well, I think that's the tragic thing, actually, that, you know, we did have it, but we have a media, and this goes back to the whole issue of journalists. You know, we have a media that succeeded in painting Corbyn as, you know, I wanted Corbyn to win the election and all that sort of thing, but I'm not a devout, you know, Corbyn admirer or anything like that. I think he's a great man, but I think he's no longer in the picture, really. But you know, they were able to demonize him to such an extent that people either thought he was a terrible man, or they thought he was pathetic, or they didn't know what he stood for. But people do believe what the media tell them, and we have got a terribly corrupt media. And again, I mean, that is obviously not a current thing. Again, Jane and I have been reading for our political reading group a book set in the 1970s in Germany.
Mm.
All the same sorts of things going on then. But perhaps, as I say, perhaps I've just drifted through life with rose-tinted glasses and not realised how bad it was all the time, and it's no worse now than it was then. I don't know, but to me it seems to be getting worse, and I'm very unhappy about it.
Do you think maybe that, Mark, having had so much hope, you know, that it felt like actually, you know, we had, because I remember, you know, as I was growing up and became an adult, we had Labour got in, the Blair government, Obama got in America, and it seemed like we were on a very positive trajectory. And then Trump got in, and that was a little bit frightening. And then, you know, obviously Corbyn and the Labour Party in the 2017 election results. Do you think having that hope has distorted our view of how, you know, how much hope we've got now?
There we go. Right. Unfortunately, I have a different mic to everybody else on the main show. Right. What I'm thinking is, I read a tweet a couple of days ago that Jeremy Corbyn was the last chance for peaceful change that the UK will have. But I also think with Jeremy, because basically he didn't just say he'd been to the top of the mountain and seen the positive change. He actually took us to the top of the mountain, and we saw the promised land. So that's why people are not just going quietly into the night. And certainly we need to look at 1984 again. I remember a T-shirt I saw when I was looking at on a website, and it said "Make Orwell fiction again," which I thought was quite an interesting quote. And I think that's what we're here for. We're here to propose the alternative. And one of the other books I'd say for people to read is The Ragged Trouser Philanthropist. Virtually everything, apart from the thing with Julian Assange, is covered in there. There's fire and rehire. Barrington even puts the way that we could actually deal with the private energy society, where all those who have shares in the private energy companies, which is, sorry, I'm going off topic, could get a pension. It's all in there. Read properly the Ragged Trouser Philanthropist. It is a blueprint for a socialist society. But lots of people like to wave the book, but have not read what it says. It's like the Bible. A lot of people like to think they've read that, but like to think they know what it says, but they haven't actually read it, and what have you. Even in the Ragged Trouser Philanthropist, it even says, "What do we do about people who don't work?" Barrington says, "Let them starve." Now, obviously, we don't want to do that, but that's a chat for another comment for another show. So I'll get off my hobby horses.
Oh, no, I think you're right, Mark. I think we all agree with you. I've just got a few more comments here from the viewers. Anthony says, what a government does inclusive of crimes is a reflection on that nature, on that nation. So that being the case, that government should be they should be held to account by the public. That's what we're here for, to hold them to account. And Unity News, if everyone speaks up, they can't imprison or disappear all of us. And that's the thing. We need enough of us to speak up. That's why we need to write to our MPs about Julian. That's why we need people on the vigil outside Belmarsh, because if there are enough people standing up, they can't imprison all of us, but they can pick off one or two of us if we don't stand together. Then I've got Jacqueline said, is there any socialist in the picture now? So I don't know if anyone's got an answer for that. That's a really complicated one.
How do I risk my... I've got to say, I'm quite impressed with a lot of people. Sadly, some of them are not in the Labour Party. Definitely what's happening in Powell really interests me. I've got to be honest. And if it wasn't for Momentum and other parts of the Labour Party, I know where I would be, but that's probably going to get me kicked out now, but never mind. But, I think there are a lot of interesting socialists. I don't think that we should really talk about Zara Sultana yet, but she's somebody to watch. And Nadia Whitome, obviously Richard Bergen. I would have liked to have seen Richard really in, but the other person I'd quite like to see, and he's not really socialist, Clive Lewis, and maybe even Dawn Butler. Not as socialist as Corbyn, but might bring us the change that we need.
I personally think there's some good people. Miriam, you were going to speak then.
I was just going to say, I think one of the troubles of the left is fragmentation, and we have to stop thinking. Well, I just feel that an awful lot of people, as soon as Corbyn, you're going to get lots of complaints about this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Lots of people just left the Labour Party soon as we were defeated in 2019, 2020, saying, oh, none of this is socialist enough for me. I'm this big a socialist, or I'm this big a socialist, or whatever. And I'm this big a socialist because I want to compromise with other people who are perhaps a bit less socialist than me and perhaps a bit more socialist than me. And I think we should be coming together, and I think we shouldn't be saying, well, I pulled a face actually about Clive Lewis. I think actually he's not bad, but I'm not sure that he's very much of a socialist. But I'll still have him if he's leader of the Labour Party. If he's the next, I'll have him. I'll certainly have him with in preference to what we've got at the moment. And now I'm really putting my neck on the line, aren't I? I think. I think that there's lots of good young people, but they are young and they are inexperienced. And then you've got the older people, and they're old, and that's both at both ends of the scale. It's a problem, isn't it? Corbyn's my age, and I don't think I would want to be leading a political party. I certainly wouldn't want to be starting a new political party. Even 20 years ago, I don't think. It's a real problem. We don't have very much in the middle. I mean, I think John McDonnell is great, but he's getting on. And he's hated by lots of people. Why do we lefties hate other lefties? I don't understand it. I don't hate anybody, as you know, Jane.
Oh, well, of course you don't. I know that. I might just bring Dr. Driver back in here. I've got a question for you in the chat as well, but I didn't know if you might want to comment on this, because I know, I've seen some fantastic Labour MPs standing out outside Belmarsh, sticking up for Julian. So I don't know if you've got any tips for people we should be watching.
Firstly, I mean, I'm a Labour Party member from Keir Starmer's constituency, so I can assure you, and I don't care if I put my neck on the line. I don't actually think it is. I think I've said worse, but I think he is a liar, and he has gone back on every single one of his pledges. And he should. It's a shame that somebody like him is at the head of the Labour movement, and he's a disgrace. And he has no commitment to workers' rights. He has no commitment to Britain as a peaceful nation. He is responsible for much of the problems we see within the Labour Party, with it hemorrhaging good people, people who have worked for years supporting the Labour Party, and people have left the Labour Party because they do not want to let their subscriptions pay for people like Asaf Kaplan to spy on us. We hire somebody who used to work in intelligence services to come and spy on us and to get information. This is ridiculous. The Labour Party shouldn't be a party for these kinds of people. I am very grateful for the solidarity from Claudia Webber, from Richard Bergen, who has come several times and spoke even at the Belmarsh Tribunal, John McDonnell, who as part of Jeremy's shadow cabinet went and visited Julian. He's the only MP who visited Julian in prison. He was not allowed to go, as Jeremy told us at SOAS a couple of weeks ago when Jeremy spoke from the audience. And he's, of course, been very supportive of Julian and Julian's family. And he said John was not allowed to go as a shadow cabinet member. He had to go in a personal capacity to visit Julian. So MPs are not being allowed to visit Julian in prison. This is the shame. Coming back to who are the people to watch out for, I think Miriam is right. Much as you might pull a face at one person or the other, I think most people would be better than the shower we have right now. But on the other hand, we have to be very careful that we don't consign the hope and the ambition that we had which Corbyn managed to mobilize to something which is as destructive as somebody like Keir Starmer, because I think people just said, oh yeah, let's get behind him, he's been elected. But actually, those of us who were in his constituency knew how terrible he is as an MP, in terms of protecting the left, understanding what the left is about, understanding what role the Labour Party has within the wider Labour movement. I agree that people like Zara Sultana are people to watch. I think there is some good people, but I think we have to wait and watch and see what they're like. I think people like Chris Williamson, who are no longer in the Labour Party because they were kicked out, are good people and whom we should support. And many people will not agree with this, but I support people like George Galloway who are willing to stand up against the Iraq War. Now, George has views on other things which we may not agree with, but we don't have to agree with everybody on everything. But at least we have to agree on some things, which is that we don't go and kill people abroad in illegal wars. We don't lie. We don't get elected on false promises. We don't privatize the NHS. And if people are willing to commit to this and stand by this, then I actually don't want them to have a 100% socialist label. If they can do these kinds of basic things, then that's probably okay for me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's difficult at the moment, isn't it? Really is. Just to let you know that I've put the link that you put for the book you recommended. I've put that on the YouTube and Facebook chat. So if anyone wants to have a look at that book, The Trial of Julian Assange, that looks very interesting, and we might well be doing that in our reading group. And then the question that we had was from Ellie to yourself, Dr. Driver. So I don't know to what extent you feel comfortable speaking about this. I'll read the question out, and you can let me know if you're able to answer or not. She says, have you ever tried to speak to Caroline Lucas about the anti-Semitism smears against Jeremy Corbyn, David Miller and other academics, where she and the Green Party have been very seriously misled? I'd love Feinstein to approach her too. We need the Green Party to understand and get on side and cooperating with us for a fight back. I don't know if that's something you're able to comment on.
I'm afraid that's slightly beyond my pay grade, in the sense that I don't hobnob with the likes of Caroline Lucas or have any influence with people like them. But yes, of course, it is important that people like her, who, the Green Party cannot just be green on environmental issues and not recognize the broader commitment to the left and sustainability, which are the anti-corporation kind of agenda that you need to be part of. And it is important that we get people like, I don't know Caroline Lucas personally, but yes, perhaps if you approach somebody like Andrew Feinstein, whom Ellie recommended, maybe they would be the right people to talk. Andrew, of course, is a fantastic supporter of Julian. He's himself an ENC MP who understands what political persecution is like. And I just want to remind people that there's lots of intelligent people around in the world. There's lots of intelligent people, but very few people of courage. And that courage is contagious. And I hope you make it even more contagious by standing up for Julian. And I'm shutting down, so I'm going to say thank you for having me, and please do continue with your conversation. But I'm afraid I have to go because I'm just not able to cope.
Thank you. I think we'll wind down. We'll say goodbye to everyone now. So thank you so much, Dr. Driver, for being with us. It's been so lovely to hear you speak. It's always a pleasure to hear you speak. It's been a great conversation. I'm so glad we could get the facts out and correct some wrongs that are out there. Hopefully lots of people listen to this. Yeah,
thank you for coming today. And I know sometimes we can go for quite a long and hardcore discussions on this. So thank you for being here. We just want to say about Socialist Think Tank, obviously we don't do any of this for money. None of us get paid. But if you want to join us, please go to our website. We've got the local groups. We've basically got the Southeast really represented here with Jane. And if my accent doesn't give it away, I'm one of the people in the West Midlands group. But please join us. And if you want to go to our website, socialistthinktank.com, and you can join there. It's totally free. We don't ask for any money, as I say. We're socialists. But please do get involved. Hopefully we'll do some more shows for you soon. And in the coming weeks, some really interesting ones I know that are happening in the chat. And Jane and I have all been typing away during the thing. So thank you for listening. And hopefully we'll see you again on another Socialist Night Live soon. We'll see you in a bit.
Thank you so much to Miriam too. It's been lovely to have you as well.
Thank you for inviting me.
We'll have you back again, hopefully. Thank you.
If you want to stick around, those of us who've been in the Zoom chat, we'll have a chat afterwards if you're available. We'll see you all again soon. Thanks for listening in. Okay? See you soon. Bye.
Keep the red flag flying here.